Abayithandi abayifuni
NUMSA yo NUMSA
ayiwafuna amaphutha
NUMSA
asiwafuna amakapeta
NUMSA
le-socialism
yo NUMSA.
Good day and welcome to another episode of Workers' Power with me, Ms. Pax. And I'm really excited about today's episode because this episode is actually going to be focusing on the 27th of April, which is, in the build-up towards Freedom Day. We are going to have a very important conversation with the shack dwellers movement, Abahlali baseMjondolo. Abahlali baseMjondolo are the largest shack dwellers movement in the country, and they have their own perspective on this day, which all over South Africa is celebrated as Freedom Day because it is the day when Black people in this country were actually allowed to participate legally and freely in the very first elections. And this important conversation that we're having is with the president of ABM, Comrade S'bu Zikode. He's going to tell us why they, as Abahlali baseMjondolo, do not celebrate this day. So, stay tuned for more. Good afternoon and welcome to Workers' Power, Comrade S'bu. We are so excited to have you on the show. Of course, you're all the way over there in Durban and I'm here in Johannesburg, but we're so excited for the opportunity to engage. Thank you and welcome to Workers' Power. Could you please introduce yourself, your position within the organization?
My name is S'bu Zikode. I am the president of the shack dwellers movement of South Africa, Abahlali baseMjondolo.
Thank you so much for that, Comrade S'bu. So while many South Africans and even NUMSA members know Abahlali baseMjondolo, perhaps just for those who don't, could you briefly explain the movement's objectives and why it is an important social and political force in South Africa today?
Well, Abahlali was founded in 2005. It is 18 years ago. And when it was formed, it was basically 10 years after our new democratic dispensation in 1994. Now, Abahlali was formed because promises were made and promises were broken. Lies were put before the truth. The commercial value of land was put before its social value. People were neglected. I myself lived in the Kennedy Road informal settlement where I experienced whole terrible situations where children were burned to death through shack fires. Babies were killed by rats. Those are material conditions in which ordinary and impoverished people are subjected to. So this was the reason for Abahlali to have been formed. There were no clever individuals that thought we should just form the organization. It was out of anger, hunger and frustration that there was a need for Abahlali to be formed. And at that point, impoverished people in South Africa were treated as if they cannot think for themselves. They do not count in our society. In fact, we were treated as if we are beneath the law. So these were compelling reasons why Abahlali was formed. So Abahlali remains relevant given the high rate of unemployment in South Africa, given the widening inequality that continue to terrorize our communities, but given also the poverty levels that we continue to experience. So people find themselves neglected. They feel that their dignity gets vandalized every day. So we have a reason to form this organization to tackle the issues of inequality, the injustices that continue to terrorize and compromise our humanity.
So this year is a very significant year in South Africa. We are officially at 30 years of democracy, and this is, of course, on the 27th of April, it would have been 30 years of democracy. Abahlali baseMjondolo have a very different perspective on this day, which is commonly celebrated as Freedom Day. And instead, your movement has celebrated or commemorated as Unfreedom Day. What does Unfreedom Day mean for ABM? When you speak about Unfreedom Day, could you please unpack the burning questions facing the working class today and explain why they should not celebrate Freedom Day?
Well, we all know that today many people in South Africa remains without land in their own country of birth. Statistics tells us that 87% of our land remains in the white minority hands, particularly the white commercial farmers. It is a disgrace for ordinary black majority of this country not to have land in their country, not to mention homelessness that continue to haunt many families in this country. So it would be unjust, it would be unfair for us to have reasons to celebrate freedom. So freedom without land, freedom without decent housing, freedom without dignity, freedom without service delivery, without access to basic services such as access to water and sanitation, without access to electricity, makes what we call fake freedom. So we should not be educated, we should not be lectured about freedom. Freedom for us means something that we should feel within us. But freedom means to live in dignity. Freedom means to be treated with respect and dignity every day. Freedom means the right to organize freely. Freedom means to be able to be engaged with respect, meaningful engagement. But freedom means that there should be nothing for us without us. So anything, no matter how progressive it is, it has to have support of popular masses. It has to be able to engage ordinary men and women in the street. So freedom without us given that right, of course, it will never be given. Freedom has to be taken. Hence, Abahlali were formed. So we are not expecting anybody to deliver freedom one day. It is for that reason this movement has been formed, and it is for these reasons why we continue to struggle every day. We do not expect anybody to hand over dignity, freedom to us. It will never be delivered. It is taken. And we are in a process of taking the real freedom.
Thank you for that answer, Comrade S'bu. So for my next question, I would just like to understand, given that Abahlali identifies as a socialist movement that is building socialism from below, in concrete terms, what does that mean actually?
Socialism, as many comrades understand, is an ability for the working class, popular masses, to be able to configure the kind of a society that they want. So socialism for us means that we become more humane to each other. So it doesn't really mean those big concepts, but it really means for us to be able to struggle together, the right to actually claim what we want collectively. But socialism means the right to be able to decide our future from below. So it's basically freedom from below, meaning the masses of impoverished, marginalized community having a voice, and that voice created by popular masses through organizing creates the kind of society that the majority think is rightful for them. So in other words, socialism means for us to act together in a manner that supports, in the manner that recognizes the humanity of everyone. So it means fundamental services taken by the people. We must be able to take charge of our life. It means we must be able to have access to land. We must be able to have access to decent housing. We must also be able to look after our environment. So that's what socialism means. And it's something that we should really strive for in our lifetime, because it shouldn't be something that would be delivered one day. Our day-to-day action has to reflect the kind of a society that we want. So it means the social value of land comes before its commercial value. That's what socialism would be. We cannot even begin to speak about socialism without the rapid release of land to the rightful owners, protecting the indigenous people, their language, their knowledge, their culture. It is very important that we acknowledge that.
So, Comrade S'bu, you are currently speaking on Workers' Power, which is, as you know, it's a channel which is has a dedicated union audience. But we've chosen to speak to you because we believe that ABM is an important strategic alliance for a trade union movement like NUMSA. We are actually trying to link shop floor and community struggles. That is our explicit goal as a channel. And and this is why for us, for the NUMSA audience, this is so important. Why do you think that this is important, specifically from the perspective of ABM rather? Why is it, and what is the significance of linking shop floor struggles with community struggles?
That is very important. We have noted that before one becomes a worker, one is an Abahlali, is an ordinary man and woman that has a responsibility of building one's neighborhood. Before we can talk about the employment politics, before we can talk about liberation in the working environment. So it is important that workers understand and accept that before they are workers, they are part of us as community activists. So it is very important that Abahlali as well, those who are also struggling in communities, in urban centers, for instance, to also acknowledge that the unity of the working class in general is very important. So by this, I mean employed and unemployed working class people. We can only conquer, we can only emerge victorious when these two activists are able to work together. So our power is not complete in isolation to the power of the employed working class. So it must also seek in the minds of the employed working class that we also contribute the same value and the same fight that they are actually working for to improve the working conditions and worker rights, whether in factory or in any working setup. It is important that that becomes equally important with the struggles that are also taking place in our shantytown, in our township, in our favelas, in our rural areas. So it is important, therefore, that the two struggles do not get separated. So we can only imagine and emerge victorious when the worker strugglers together with activists in communities are working together. So it would be very difficult or almost impossible for us to divorce the two strugglers and think that these are two separate entities. So it is important that it also sinks in our own heart as Abahlali, as communities, in community struggles, that the workers, employed or unemployed, are equally important. So in fact, our power lies with those that are at work, vis-a-vis. So it's important as leaders to try and consolidate the struggles, because we can only win when we act together, when we act as one, when we stand in solidarity with each other. So Abahlali takes very seriously the struggles that are taking place in working spaces. We respect working environment, but it is mainly because people spend almost 80 to 90% of their time at work compared to having time with their families, with their communities. So it is for that reason why they should also embrace and support the struggles in communities. So the two are very important, that we begin to work together, we begin to stand in solidarity and build each other's strength in order for us to win. Otherwise, we'll never win the struggle against imperialism, the struggle against exploitive workers. So today in eThekwini, workers are engaged in a struggle. We feel ashamed as unemployed working class not supporting them because we feel not welcome. So they need us And at this time, they even need us more than ever before. And we need them. So these strugglers, it's a responsibility that we as leaders carry, that we have to unify and consolidate the struggle of the working class people, employed and unemployed.
With the upcoming elections, which are now around the corner, and I'm sure within ABM itself, this has been a very, very contentious and interesting issue. We have also seen a rise in xenophobic sentiment. Over the years, we've continuously seen xenophobia rear its ugly head. Abahlali has a reputation for being a pan-African socialist movement. What is ABM's position when it comes to this issue of xenophobia, and how are you actively working to combat it?
Well, the issue of xenophobia is very disappointing. It is unfortunate because we see it as self-hate, particularly on the African people. We have always mirrored ourselves. We have always mirrored migrant communities as our own. So our position on the xenophobia has been very clear over the past 18 years at least. We are very clear that we are not going to tolerate any utterances, forms, behavior of xenophobia, because it sends a very wrong message about South Africa, about the Africans in general, that we begin to hate ourselves, our own. And of course, it is against the true Pan-Africanist teaching that says umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. So our struggles are very important, but they can only be important when we value humanity, irregardless of color, creed, gender, religion, and all of that. So it is important that we are consistent, that xenophobia will be rejected at any time, whenever it raises its ugly face. So even at these crucial times of election, we are hearing political parties using xenophobia as a way of gaining voters. But in a way, only if they knew that when they start making those xenophobic comments, they actually they are betraying themselves, because not every voter agree with them. So in Abahlali, for instance, you're actually losing points, because that's not what we're going to vote. That's not what we're going to allow. So I guess political parties also needs to be educated, because it goes in a, for us, it reinstates and it reminds us of the colonial thinking and the task that we have to decolonize minds. For us, xenophobia really talks a lot about decolonial mandate that we all have to embark in.
If I may ask again on the subject of elections, I know that for a movement as yourselves, you are the biggest shareholders movement in South Africa. So of course, the question of who to vote for is definitely a very important question. What is ABM's attitude to elections, and also in particular to the various parties which are contesting? Are there any parties in your view that are promoting a working class agenda?
Well, coming to the election question, first of all, we see this moment as a very crucial moment for social movements and movements from around South Africa. 30 years we have been in our democracy. So this means that we have to review, we have to reflect on the 30 years journey of the so-called democracy. But this moment has presented Abahlali with an opportunity to actually use this election moment as a tool to build and consolidate the power of Abahlali. So we are going to use this moment. We have started using this moment not only to advance the interest of Abahlali and the working class in general, but we felt that this moment should also be used to center Abahlali's demands at the national stage. So this moment, Abahlali is making sure that our demands for many years are centered in the national debate. But we're also using this moment to consolidate the power of Abahlali post-election. So our position right now has been, because this moment has presented us with an opportunity to reflect about 30 years of our democracy, but we have had series of discussion around what it means, where Abahlali's position is going to be in this particular moment. So Abahlali has embarked on a process to rethink our politics, but also to engage with our communities. We have been very clear that we are not going to haphazardly take a position. We are carefully discussing that in different communities, in different platforms, different structures of our movement. So the feedback that we have got so far is that, first of all, Abahlali does not believe that there is any political party that represents the interests of the working class. In other words, there is no left party currently. So Abahlali also agrees that there is no party that is worth the vote of Abahlali.
Yes.
However, Abahlali has the responsibility and the duty to remove the ANC. So we are clear with one thing. So our first task as Abahlali is to remove the ANC, outseat it or weaken it. But the second task would obviously to say, who do we reward? Of course, there's nobody to reward, because elections are times to punish those who have not done well, reward those who have done pretty well. But nobody has done well. So there's no political party that Abahlali is pro or would be voting for. That is why there is this debate that is still ongoing to say, but we cannot then fold our arms because there is no political party. So we're in a dilemma in actually discussing that. So, but to get out of that dilemma, we have established a series of discussion and a process because we want to emerge post-election as united as we are, because these moments can actually create divisions in the movement. So there are processes has been to discuss this in our General Assembly open, but mandate our branches and communities to have this discussion at community level, because we believe in the democracy from below. But while doing that, we are also, next week we will have a 3-day camps where different leaders from different settlements and provinces would discuss these over 3 days. What we'll be discussing is to get the reflection of our communities and what the leadership thinks, and then consolidate that, and then develop what we call a people's manifesto, a people's demand, and then develop a criteria to say, where can we then throw our collective power with an aim of outsitting the ANC, weakening the ANC, not because that party would actually provide any difference in Abahlali. So we will create collectively create a criteria, look at the ideological belief of the organization, but already there is a set of principles and criteria that Abahlali have begun to put it in place. One has been an acknowledgement that our country is facing leadership and intellectual difficulty. So in other words, we are confronted with leadership that lacks intellectual and moral capability. This is what we are confronted with. So part of the criteria, obviously, and the principle is to look for a clean governance, is to look, maybe set aside the ideological question, because none of the party represent the left politics, but also making sure that we are looking at the parties that associate themselves with the release of land, that might have a socialist orientation, but we know it's going to be difficult to have that. But there's a set of really criteria and principles that Abahlali would be basing their discussion and decision on. And then after the camp next week, we will take this back to our General Assembly first week of March. Again, these are a series of serious discussions because we have come to appreciate that we use this moment as a democratic tool to actually build our power in advance, because there are no miracles that are going to happen on the 29th of May. And whoever is poor now will remain poor post-election. So we would rather want to emerge victorious and strong post-election because there's nothing new. But we are hoping that at least by the Unfreedom Day, we will be in a position to collectively make a strategic announcement, because we're thinking tactical. I think what we needed to appreciate in this process is a democratic process and the process of decision making that really takes serious the views of the people on the ground. So election day on the 29th is actually a tick box. It's an event. So we don't view this as an event that we are going to tick box and as if there are miracles that are going to happen post-election. So that is why we have engaged in this process. But what has been important prior to engaging into this process, we've been embarking on a voter education drive to make sure that our communities, our branches, understand the value and the importance of voting if we were to change the power relations. So we needed to embark on voter education so that our communities can actually make an informed decisions. And in doing that, we have been working with the My Vote Count, an NGO based in Cape Town, who have facilitated but also helped us to unpack but provoke difficult questions about the reality, the power that we have. So we've been organizing all these years to actually build power of the working class from below and to consolidate our power. So we think we are now presented with that moment where our collective vote can actually translate into power, the power that can remove the ANC.
Thank you for that, Comrade S'bu. Very, very interesting and insightful response. And just finally, if I can just ask you this question, we know that ABM identifies as an internationalist movement. Considering the ongoing genocide that's happening against the people of Palestine, what is ABM's position on this? Do you have a message of solidarity for our brothers and sisters in Palestine?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I must take off my hat for the people of Palestine. They have actually reminded us of the responsibility that we carry. But they have also helped us to understand what courage looks like, but they have helped us to become a better human being. Having to resist in the face of so much violence that we've never seen imagine in our lifetime. So we want to salute our Palestinian comrades. We want to express our love for them. We want to express our heartfelt solidarity. We know that this is not enough. Words can never be enough to confront the forces of capitalism, the genocide that continue to terrorize them, what we have seen happening in children of Gaza, women, civilians, and everybody else who suffer from the daily bombarding in Palestine is unimaginable. All we can say is that our hearts, our souls are with the Palestinians, and we know that this is not enough. And we are saying to the comrades in Palestine, of course, solidarity means acting in the interests, of course, of those who are in need of solidarity in their terms, basically. So we want to invite them to actually educate us and command us of what kind of solidarity that will be meaningful to them, that will make them to be at peace. We know that all they need now is peace. And there will be no peace when bombarding and the genocide continues. We continue to do what we are capable of doing in South Africa, in this country, in the movement, in every of our General Assembly, our gatherings, we always talk about Palestine. So we wish to send that message that we are with them, but we know that it is not enough. We want to send our love, we want to send our heartfelt solidarity. We think the heart connection can actually be felt by them. So the amount of violence that we continue to witness makes us feel helpless. Sometimes it makes us feel useless and not doing anything. But if there's more that we can do from our side, we want to invite our comrades in Palestine to tell us what is it exactly that can actually make sense to them, so that they can feel that while the distance can be practical, impossible to make something practical for them, but in heart and in spirit, we are with them, and we participate in a number of protests, a number of activities and programs that are denouncing the apartheid Israel state that continue to terrorize them. So we have realized and learned that actually the genocide against the Palestinian is actually the genocide against all of us in the world. And for being silent makes us complicit in the genocide.
Thank you. What a powerful sentiment that you've expressed there. And we just want to appreciate the fact that you have given us your time to join us on Workers' Power. We know that you're extremely busy, but we really appreciate that you've given us your time to share with us aspects of, your views on this very important subject of the elections and international solidarity. Thank you for your time, Comrade S'bu. And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Workers' Power. Don't forget to click like, don't forget to click subscribe, and we will see you again in the next episode of Workers' Power with me, Miss Pucks. Remember to follow NUMSA Media on YouTube, like, subscribe, and share to as many people as you know.